a suburb of Detroit, and I had a comfortable upbringing, but I never thought of myself as privileged. It took me many years to realize that I was incredibly privileged simply because my race or my gender were never a factor in how people interacted with me. I began my career in the space industry at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. I was young and driven and ready to help America take its next steps in space. In 1992, just 4 years into my career, NASA Administrator Dan Golden declared that the space agency was too, quote, pale, male, and stale. I remember this announcement very clearly, and he was right. I also remember how the agency stumbled and mishandled this suggestion from the top. Today, non-white employees make up 28%, and women make up about a third of NASA's workforce. These numbers represent the agency as a whole, and my guess is the percentages are much lower for the technical jobs, and I know for certain that they're lower for the leadership jobs. My observation is that NASA is doing slightly better than the aerospace industry averages, but still not good enough. Diversity in the aerospace industry is pretty bad, and our goal should not be to just not be the worst. We need to strive to be the best. I always knew that diversity was an issue, but I didn't do much about it early on as I focused on my career and on raising a family. Over the latter half of my career, though, I've had the opportunity to influence, and I've hired more than 1,000 people into highly technical organizations. I designed and installed programs focused on diversity, promoted women, and experimented with new approaches. As one example, I created a unique women's weekend event with university students and faculty. I sponsored early career development programs, and I recruited professors to spend their sabbaticals in-house. The outcome here was to develop some very diverse role models for our early career engineers. Despite trying, the results were average, no better than average. And 35 years later, I still work in a white male-dominated industry. Since leaving Blue Origin more than 2 years ago, I've taken on what I like to call a portfolio career. I provide management consulting services to a wide range of organizations, including industry associations, universities, and large and small companies. I'm an operating partner with C5 Capital, a specialized investment firm focused on investing in critical infrastructure and the secure data ecosystem. These are companies operating at the intersection of cloud computing, cybersecurity, space, and energy. I serve as an advisor or a board director to companies working in space, hypersonics, telecommunications, and technology. And I mentor early and mid-career professionals through formal programs like the Brooke Owens Fellowship and informal mentoring to people that I've met along the way. One of my most visible clients is AIAA, the American Institute for Aeronautics and Astronautics. I serve as the executive producer for ASCEND, which stands for Accelerating Space Commerce, Exploration, and New Discovery. It's AIAA's new space forum, and it's the world's first outcomes-focused, transdisciplinary space conference designed to accelerate building our off-world future. During 2020, which was our inaugural year, we attracted more than 9,000 people to our virtual events, with a significant percentage of those being non-AIAA members, and an equally significant number coming from adjacent industries, those companies who are not currently doing business in space. Last July, we put on a series of webinars on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The first of these 2 sessions was focused on people of color, and we partnered with the National Society of Black Engineers, NSBE. The second session was co-hosted with NSBE, the Society of Women Engineers, the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, and the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. The videos and the key takeaways are available on the ascend.events website, and I believe this material can be useful to any company looking to build its diversity and education programs. I also see Ascend as a platform for you, all of you here today, to stand up and participate, have your voice heard, and develop outcomes that can improve the industry overall. You are here today to participate in a workshop on charting the path to a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive space industrial base. The results from today will be fed into a research project led by MBDA and the University of Mississippi Center for Air and Space Law. The invite list included large and small aerospace firms working on aviation and space projects. The organizers sought people from industry and from government, federal and state legislators, as well as other outside voices. The focus is on aerospace, but it is important to bring in these outside voices to help share new use cases and new approaches. It is imperative that we study the companies who are doing it right. But do we know what that means, doing it right? Does your current organization get it when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion? I hope that answering these questions is something that you will spend time discussing today in the workshop. For example, does your employer have an active and visible program in place to make the organization more diverse, equitable, and inclusive? Has your employer named a person responsible for DEI initiatives? If yes, does that person report to the CEO? Does your employer know you're here today? And if yes, is your employer supporting your participation in this workshop by allowing you to attend on work time? What we are starting today is not just about hiring minorities. That is not the only outcome we are seeking. We are working to put mechanisms in place to create equity representation in the space industrial base. This is a challenge. It will take hard work, and we are all here because we've made it a priority. The ultimate result from today will be new programs that are designed and put into place. We might find these new programs and approaches by looking to adjacent industries for tips and tricks and for models of the right kind of behavior. Because when it comes to developing a diverse, equitable, and inclusive organization, specialty rocket science skills are not necessarily required. We don't need to invent something new for the aerospace industry. We should freely borrow the best practices from automotive, entertainment, industrials, consumer products, and hospitality, for example. When we have millions of people living and working in space, we will need representation from all of these industrial groups anyway. So let's just start working with them now. Within your organization, some will agree with the results, some will disagree, and some will not be engaged at all. You're going to need to build a coalition of people by educating and converting. This will require some carefully thought out discussions. You might see this in the form of pushback or a complete lack of pushback on DEI initiatives at your company. If you're not getting pushback, my advice is you're not creating an open forum for discussion. It is critical to gather broad input to identify and address any pushback that comes up throughout the process. I've learned how important it is to shine a bright light on these issues and give people an opportunity to respond and let you know how they really think. It can be enlightening, and you can learn a lot about yourself and about your team. So let's talk about hiring. We all know how hard it is to find diverse candidates to fill your open positions. We know how hard it is to find companies led by diverse founders. There is simply not enough diversity in aerospace leadership at the executive level or on boards. And as far as recruiting goes, we need to broaden our focus. The elite universities should be just one of our targets. We can and will find exceptional candidates from all universities, including HBCUs. As far as the major universities, North Carolina State and the University of Texas, El Paso are great examples of universities that are graduating a large number of minority engineers. While the focus today is on what we can do to make your existing company more diverse, some of you may decide to start your own business in the aerospace industry. There are powerful incentives in place for women-owned and minority-owned businesses to contract with the government. Resources on these and other topics are available to you via the Minority Business Development Agency and your local MBDA Business Center. I want to spend a few minutes sharing my thoughts on investing in the space industry. As an operating partner at C5 Capital, I've had the opportunity to think through what is out there and to review a lot of business plans. There is an incredible amount of innovation going on in aerospace right now, from the development of small Earth imaging satellites to flying cars to new 3D printed rockets and hardware. We were luckily able to wedge this event in between a SpaceX Starship demonstration flight yesterday and the planned flight of 2 Falcon 9s tomorrow. It truly is an amazing time. And we're nearing the time where new space businesses will be able to be created on top of the space infrastructure that's developed by companies like SpaceX and many others. This type of thing is common today with enterprises and software as a service business that are built on top of the cloud, on payment systems, on collaboration platforms, and on DevOps and analytics tools. We already have low-cost launch, low-cost small satellites, and ground station as a service. With these, we are close to being able to create a business using space data without the need to build your own rockets or satellites. And because of this, becoming successful in this new reality is much less capital intensive and much more about finding a niche and serving customers than it is about rocket science. The amount of private funding going into the space industry is growing rapidly, from $3.25 billion in 2018 to over $8.7 billion in 2020. And I see no obvious signs that this trend will slow, because we're now seeing some opportunities for these startups to exit and return money to their investors, either through acquisition or through a public offering. Some very recent examples include Made in Space, Blue Canyon Technologies, and Virgin Galactic. And the more exits we have, the more normal space investing will become. And this is a really good thing. Private investment is important, but the government will always be an important player in the aerospace industry. The key difference now is that the government is participating in new commercial businesses by committing to buying services and being one of many customers. Just a few years ago, the government was the only customer in much of the space industry. The aerospace supply chain is also fragmented and aging. Every space hardware company needs to buy circuit boards, wire harnesses, machining services, raw materials, and many other services. We can't all afford to vertically integrate. So there is room for new players in the supply chain, especially those applying technology to enable new solutions. At C5 Capital, we have seen firsthand the benefits of investing in a more diverse set of founders. Across our C5 Accelerate portfolio, 26% of our companies are led by Black founders, and 33% are led by female founders. The industry averages are 1% and 2.2%, respectively. The successful growth of this portfolio is leading our thinking about doing more, and we are now working on an early-stage fund focused on investment in edtech, fintech, AI, logistics, and other high-growth industries that are led by diverse founders. We know that diversity will not happen on its own. It is important that we be intentional and work at it every day, every month, every year. Whether you focus on improving from within or starting your own organization, there are resources available to you and a growing recognition at how important it is. Before I close, I want to share some advice about leadership. Organizations need leadership at all levels, not just the executives and not just those who have manager or leader in their title. Behaving like a leader means always seeing the glass as being half full, finding the positive, and encouraging others to work backward from the ultimate objective. I encourage you all to get out of your office and walk around. For the time being, zooming around may have to be good enough, but do go down into your organization and across your organization, several levels deep. Listen, build your story, and then take action. This is what great leaders do. Thank you all for participating in the session today, being open and sharing your experiences and your ideas. And thank you for working to make change. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Rob. That was it really struck me when you said how many minority and women companies your company was investing in, and I think it's really heartening to hear that. I was wondering, you talked about ed tech and fintech, and the companies that you talk about that had the minority and diversity founders, were those aerospace companies? And in terms of yes or no, but what would you, there are a lot of people on this call who are going to be advising startups or who are themselves trying to get a startup going. What would you advise in terms of what you're looking for in terms of maybe you can't be diverse right away because you can only afford 2 people? What kind of recommendations would you have in building from scratch?
Well, first off, I want to say the portfolio that C5 Accelerate has invested in, there's 7, I believe, cohorts. I joined C5 in 2020. They've been around for 7 years. So there's, and most of their prior focus has been in cybersecurity, AI, and cloud computing. So most of those companies, the statistics I gave are in companies in those areas. C5 has recently, with me joining the firm, put an emphasis on space because we really believe space is the high ground for data and critical infrastructure. So those investments in ed tech, fintech, logistics are ideas that they have for creating a fund to focus on diverse founders, and that work is in development. But I'd encourage those on the webinar today to look at C5 Accelerate in Google. You can see the whole portfolio and links to those companies and the successes that they've had. On your other comment in terms of startups, I mean, the most obvious recommendation is starting early. With the co-founders, say you have 2 co-founders, starting early with diversity is critical. It really sets the tone for what's important to you, making it a priority in your early hires. It's critical. And I will say it is easy to hire a non-diverse organization. It's a little bit harder to hire or to build a diverse organization, but it's so it does take emphasis from the executive leadership team and making it a priority and being intentional about it. Is really important. So it's much harder when you're 100 people to go back and look at your numbers. In the results I talked about us being average, that was a result of hard work. So when I say it's easy, I'll say it's relatively easy. It's never hard to build a company from scratch, and I don't want to minimize it, but I just think it's the priority priority needs to be placed very early on.
Yeah, and I think, one other sort of thought to add to that is the fact that diversity is also, we're seeing more and more studies showing that it's the diverse boards and the diverse executives that are enjoying the most success, because you really, as a company, you really need as much sort of innovation from all angles, and people look at things very differently based on where they grew up, how they grew up, where their culture was. We have a question from Yulia Akishiva. Sorry if I'm butchering your name. How do you start a conversation with the people who do not understand or agree that investing time, money, human resources in diversity and gender equality is smart, on top of being the right thing to do?
Well, I think I hinted at it in my remarks. there's a great book out there called Crucial Conversations, and you know, you're always, you know, if you surround yourself with people that agree with you in your positions, you know, the outcome there is going to be good, but I think it's better when you get a bunch of diverse voices, and so I think it's important when you get these opposing views that it's going to take a little bit of education one by one. You're not going to, you know, turn the tide immediately with the whole group at once. You have to work at it. You have to find some advocates with these opposing views. You need to educate and help to convert them so that they can help to bring along others. And it's those are difficult and challenging conversations to have. But I think the organization is better for it if you do have that. And I think, you know, likewise, if you get no pushback in your organization, as I mentioned in my remarks, I don't think that's indicative that everybody agrees with you. I think it's indicative that that people don't feel comfortable bringing things up. So you have to make sure that you have an organization that is comfortable having these discussions. So okay.
I think that's really key, and it's sort of it's interesting. I like the way you sort of do the point counterpoint in terms of you really it's important to get your ideas heard, and it's more important than ever to sort of try and get through to the naysayers and the people who don't want to hear it, because they're the people who have to hear it the loudest. So
Yeah.
I think the the lesson for me is just keep talking,
Yeah.
and don't let sort of
Yeah.
the backs of people stop you from. And again, we can't underscore enough that it's not just about doing the right thing, but it's about the success of the company overall. And really, I think hadn't really thought about how much more difficult it is to add diversity to a 100-person organization than to when it just starts. But again, that really makes a lot of sense, and a really great way to think about your strategic plan in terms of how you're going to build your dream.
Mhm.
So we have Jamer McLee 2 minutes ago. Thanks for the keynote, Rob. With everyone competing for jobs in the post-corona economy, the barrier to entry is high for minorities. What is the best way for point of entry, in your opinion, for engineers and non-engineers alike?
To find jobs in the industry, yeah, I advise a lot of early career professionals, and I think the best advice I can give is there's a lot of you need to do your research. There's a lot of opportunities beyond the big companies. You know, everyone wants to think about SpaceX and Blue Origin. They want to think about Boeing and Northrop Grumman and Lockheed, but there are a lot of very small companies with, you know, 6 to 20, 30 people in them that are also looking for people. And for the early careers, they're looking for interns. They're looking to, you know, get people in, but they're also looking to hire full-time staff. And some people, you know, they're worried about. I think it's realistic to be a little bit concerned about, you know, sustainability of these companies and you know, stability. And I also would say that in the space industry in particular, we've seen an unprecedented amount of growth. There is an enormous amount of opportunity out there. And so, you know, I started my career out at NASA, a civil service job. I was super lucky to go in and do this. It's incredibly stable. When I left NASA to go to Kistler Aerospace, my dad said, you know, why are you leaving this incredibly stable job? And I had personal reasons why I was moving to the Pacific Northwest, but I was also really excited about the opportunity to get into commercial space. And I encourage others to do the same. I recognize not everyone can take a flyer on a startup company, but if you can, especially early in your career, it's going to give you some really unique experiences, exposure to very different things, not just, you know, engineering, you're going to get exposure to building an organization, building processes, building, new facilities and capabilities, working with customers that you wouldn't get in a larger company. So I encourage, kind of just look below the level of all the companies that are getting the hot headlines right now and try to predict who might be getting them, a year from now, with your help. So.
I think, yeah, sort of going to a startup is trial by fire, right? I mean, all of a sudden, I know for lawyers, certainly, I tell my law students, if you go and put your own shingle out or you go to a small company, you're going to be everything, human resources, taxes, and so forth. We have Kim asking, what organization in the space industry do you believe, do you believe are making noteworthy strides in their DEI efforts? What unique approaches have you seen that inspire you?
Well, I've always been inspired and impressed with Ball Aerospace in Boulder, Colorado. They regularly rate very highly for DEI efforts. I have a good friend who was an executive there until about a year ago, Deborah Factor, who's now running the Airbus U.S. Space business, and it's but the reason that Ball does it is because they have executives who care like deeply about it, and they've made this a priority. So what I haven't seen is anything truly like innovative, like something completely different approach. And so the secret, I mean, you have to have inspired leadership that cares in the organization. As I mentioned in my remarks, I think, looking to adjacent industries and companies might be, it's something I was thinking about as I was preparing for today. And it's something that I'm very focused on with Ascend in terms of, we're going to need mining companies and hospitality companies and pharmaceutical companies in space. Why not look to them now to see how they approach, DEI? How do they do things differently in their businesses? Because we know, for example, that the hospitality industry and marketing and advertising have, industry leading diversity numbers in terms of percentages of women and minorities in their midst. I know there's a McKinsey report done a few years ago on this topic. So how are the other industries doing? What about automotive? Is there something inspiring or a valuable lesson that we can learn from them? So.
I think, you haven't seen any innovation yet. Maybe that the result of this workshop will be some of that innovation that we're all looking for, right?
Exactly.
So I have a question. Can you talk a little bit about industries needed in space that one would not expect? You just talked about entertainment and hospitality, but what other, are there others that you think of where somebody who's not an engineer actually might have an entree into space that you wouldn't necessarily think about?
Yeah. I just had a call last week, and I can't name them yet, but had a call last week with the head of innovation at a very large consumer products health and beauty firm, and they're very interested in how the weightless and hard vacuum environment of space might be used to make their products better. Doing research in space on the International Space Station or its follow-on, the Axiom Space Station. So wanting to know how to get involved. I think one that there's a relatively large group of medical doctors who are interested in looking at the space environment and figuring out how to improve treatment here on Earth, not just in terms of techniques, but can we support telemed? Can we use space technology to support telemedicine in rural areas? Can we use what we learn in space to support the development of empathic kind of tools that can help with people who are isolated by nature of their job or their living conditions and things like that? So I think there's a few things there. Those are the things we're trying to uncover and talk about within Ascend, because we want to get these industries working together to find, joint areas for co-investment and new company and new product development.
I have to think about getting my cosmetics from the moon, huh? Or from maybe it'll be get those crow's feet be gone, right?
Yeah.
So we have, let's see, sorry, yes. Mary Rogers, thank you so much for this forum. Early educational intervention and engagement is vital in the sciences. How do you encourage genuine investment in minority communities to build trusting relationships and future pipelines?
Boy, that's something that was talked about a lot in our DEI webinars for Ascend last summer. And there's a couple of key points that came out. From the community, it's really bringing the story, to where the minorities are, going to the schools, going to K-12, starting early, keeping it continuous, and also using pop culture to help people understand and inspire the folks on the first DEI webinar. They talked about Hidden Figures and Black Panther as two movies that were good examples of inspiring people to go into science and technical fields, and seeing role models in that area. So those were two particularly important things. I think I would encourage you and all to kind of go to the Ascend.events website and look at the 5 key takeaways from each of those two webinars, and see or spend the time listening, because I think they're useful. And I've encouraged AIAA because I think this is important content to develop DEI programs at companies across the country. So